Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Jeff and the Rabbi. I got to tell you, I'm going to have to show some of my anger today. You know, last night I'm going to tell the audience here, I got a text from Rabbi Friedman discussing the topic, and I think we've gone too far now. I think we've finally gone too far. I know the ratings have been going up with all these salacious stories and topics that we've been doing here. You know, we talk about the homosexual basketball player, we talk about progressive ideas, birth control, all these things like that. I think we're going too far. This is a family show. And I think finally, what are we going to be, the lamestream media now? We have to get the ratings by going all these ridiculous things, and we've already covered some of this stuff in birth control already. I mean, the whole concept of condom mechanics, I think, is ridiculous. I didn't even know they needed mechanics for that, for one thing. Two, it's how could that prove God? I think it's ridiculous. I'm going to put my foot down here, and I'm going to say enough is enough. It is time for us to get back to real news, to real family shows. I'm not into this condom mechanics. That just doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
I mean, hold on. Wait.
I think.
Wait.
Well.
Yeah, condom mechanics.
Let you get yourself straightened out.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Quantum mechanics. What does that have to do?
Quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics.
You know, it's like I took my car into the shop.
Right.
There's a couple of guys there. They were quantum mechanics, and they fixed my car and all that.
This is awkward.
Yeah.
This is awkward. One of us got the title wrong. I'm not going to point fingers because why point fingers?
Yeah,
why should we do this? Nothing to do with condom mechanics. This is quantum mechanics of proving God.
Okay.
Well, one of us really needs to do more research before we come on this show.
There you go.
I'm not going to say who.
John, put a note down there not to forward this show to my kids. Okay.
Probably not a good idea. My bad. I'll take blame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So back to you, Rabbi Friedman.
Quantum mechanics. Quantum. Yeah. Yeah. You know.
Okay.
There was a fella named Schrodinger. Schrodinger had a cat.
Okay.
He didn't really have a cat, but he said, let's say he had a cat.
Okay.
You put the cat inside a box, and in the box is a vial of poison.
Okay.
And in the vial of poison is a little atom. If that atom disintegrates, it releases the poison from the vial, and the cat dies. And if it doesn't, of course, the cat doesn't die. Now the cat's closed up inside the box. You don't know if it's died or it hasn't died. Well, if it died, it's inside the box. You just don't know. You don't know. I don't know. You don't know.
Okay.
Is the cat dead or is the cat alive?
So that's the question. Well, we don't know. We don't know. We don't have proof.
Ultimately, quantum mechanics says that the cat might be dead, the cat might be alive, the cat might be both.
Right, okay.
And the cat might be, if you open the box and find it dead, then it might be now dead, but was then alive. But if you open it up and find it alive, it might have been dead then, but now alive.
Well, that's the part I don't really understand. Is this a percentage thing? Is there like the percentage chance that is a 70% chance that it's dead and that you're not?
So basically, here's what happens.
Right.
Here's what happened. This is what's really interesting. And this is why am I talking about this? This is because the God thing. This is where the God thing gets into the whole picture. It's so fascinating. Because so many times, someone turned me on to this, a friend started me reading about quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, there's a guy named Brian Greene who's written a lot on quantum mechanics, and what he does is he helps the layman understand quantum mechanics because it's really heady stuff. And for a guy like me, who's not a mathematician, I'm not a physicist, I don't know electronics. I mean, I'm just the layman of laymen.
Right.
So he helps people like us try to understand these things. Now, I can't say that I really understand it, but I kind of understand what they're doing. And here's what happened. Like a long time ago, we had Newtonian physics.
Okay, right.
Newtonian physics basically says that they're laws. These are absolute, immutable laws of nature.
Right.
They are facts. And those facts will govern what will happen going forward. Okay. For example, we put out a bunch of billiards, okay? And I take my ball, my cue, put the ball down there, and I shoot it.
Right.
Okay, now, Newtonian physics says that if I hit that ball with the same velocity, with the same stick, the same conditions, everything absolutely and totally the same,
Right.
that the same reaction will occur. And the 7-ball in the side pocket.
Right.
Okay? And people make a living off of that.
Right.
You know,
And
they
it makes
count on it.
sense.
They count on it.
Yeah.
And 7-ball in the side pocket and 7-ball in the side pocket. And that's if you're really good and you can duplicate that. And if the 7-ball doesn't go in the side pocket, you say, well, what happened was he's off a little bit
You
less
did the same
velocity.
thing,
He didn't
okay.
do the same thing, right? I mean, after all, he's not perfect, can't replicate himself. Quantum mechanics basically says that, you know what? If you do the exact same thing over and over and over again, many times the 7-ball will go in the side pocket. But sometimes it won't.
But sometimes it won't.
It just won't. It's been observed and tested scientifically over and over and over again that sometimes it just doesn't.
Right.
It just doesn't. And they can't figure out, like, why is that? Like, why wouldn't it? You know, what's going on with it?
Okay.
So it caused people to start this and many other types of observations. It's been very well observed, scientifically well observed, that start people to try to ask the question, what is it? What is it? What's different about physics than we understand it? Now, Albert Einstein, when he came across this theory,
Right.
he was kind of disturbed because, you know, this meant things are not predictable.
Right. Well, that could really mess with a physicist.
Right. And we really believe in predictability. As a matter of fact, we pretty much believe that everything's predictable if you could just get enough data. The reason we can't predict what's going to happen is we just don't have enough data, but otherwise everything should be predictable. We can make scientific models and all that type of stuff. But it turns out that things are really not predictable. And here's one of the most fascinating of all experiments. Here's the question. Matter. Matter. What does matter matter? Matter is every little thing that exists. Let's say electrons. Electrons are matter. Right? Teeny tiny little things. Now, let's say we take electrons and we have a piece, a cardboard, and the cardboard's got 2 little teeny tiny slits in them.
Okay.
And we shoot electrons at the cardboard.
Right.
And you'd figure what would happen. The electrons would find their way through the 2 slits. Now, if you have another piece behind that,
Right.
they can register where all the electrons hit. When you go take your target, you know, like on the shooting range,
Right.
and you would expect to see all the electrons kind of lined up
Kinda right in the same
behind
slot.
the 2 slots.
I actually heard this experiment before.
Very
I
famous.
actually have. This is kind of
Very,
scary.
very famous
Right.
experiment.
Right.
The only problem is
Doesn't work that way.
that work that way, and they
Right.
can't figure out what's going on. And what they do is they find them spread out like across the spectrum. So the problem is like this: if they are particles, they should all end up right behind the slots. If they're waves, you should expect them to be spread out because as
Right.
waves, they go through and they just spread out all over the place. Well, very interestingly, they find them sometimes, they look at them afterwards, they shoot the particles through, and they go look at the results and you see they're all spread out.
Right.
It's really strange. So they said, well, what's going on? So they put up a recorder in front of the slots to observe as they go through the slots. And sure enough, they observe particles going through the slots.
Very interesting.
Right. And you know what's really interesting? When they put up the recorder to record the particles going through the slots, and they look at the results, then they find all the particles bunched up behind the slots.
In the same spot. Right.
But when they don't put the recorder there, then they're all spread out all over the place.
Somehow the observation of this thing changes everything.
Right. And then even more
By the
interesting,
way, this is where you lose me, by the way. I can get to this far, and this is where I lose it in the quantum physics area.
if they put the recorder on the other side of the
Right.
thing and they see them coming out,
Right?
then they're coming out as a wave.
It's a wave.
But they were
right.
going in as particles.
Something's fishy here.
Sounds fishy, which really interesting because, like, what happens is it like reverse? Is it going backwards? Is the observation now creating the reality of what was before? Basically, what this really means to us, we really, really want to super simplify it. Things are just not as hard and fast as we think that they are.
This makes it even more complicated because the observation point here, that's what makes it different. That's where I get really confused.
Right. So, they've asked the question, for example, let's say it turns out that particles are a wave. They only become particles, like hard and fast, when they're observed.
Right.
So you and I are observing reality and therefore making it reality.
Right.
Of course, if we're not observing reality, like, if the tree falls in the forest,
right,
and no one's there to hear it, so didn't it make a noise? This would say no, right? Matter of fact, maybe it didn't even fall. When you come upon it later as fallen, well, it says,
was it always there?
Was it always there? Right. Right. When you find the cat and the cat is decomposing, looks like it's been in the box dead for 10 days. No, maybe you're just finding it now.
Right now.
In a state of 10-day decomposition. That
Right.
doesn't mean it died 10 days ago. Okay, so this is getting really, really confusing because they ask the question, if reality is only observed, we know we live in the universe.
So does that mean
Who's observing the universe?
that's the key?
Yeah, then, what's giving the universe form? I mean, like, someone's got to be outside of it. They'll be looking at it. Anyway, this is getting really...
So in other
really,
words, like, if I'm not looking at the moon, is the moon really there, or is somebody else observing that moon?
Yeah, and the question is, if I'm not looking at the moon, and the moon isn't there, but someone else could be looking at it, and the moon is there, at least for him, but not for you.
Right.
So you could have the moon there and not there at the same time.
Or is there some force that's observing that moon the entire time, so we don't have to worry about it? I don't know,
Right. In which case, who is that force?
Is
that God?
That's where we get to the next level.
Is that God? And then you have to ask yourself the question, is God only is God making all this happen? Well, I'll take it even a step further. And I think we've actually talked about this. I think we may have one of our sessions, I don't remember, we may have even talked about this. Going back a couple hundred years, there were some great rabbis. One of them, Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin. The other one, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. They both talked about these ideas a little bit different ways, expressed them a little bit differently. They're kind of saying the same thing. There is a prayer that we say every morning, and we recognize God. And we say, Hamachadesh b'chol yom tamid. God renews every day, constantly, the act of creation.
Right.
Which means the creation is not a constant.
I mean, every instant we're talking about.
Every instant. Every nanosecond. And if I could come up with some terminology that was smaller than nanoseconds, I would use that.
Right.
I just don't know any word for small. But the teeniest, tiniest, instant that every minute God recreates. So there's me, and then he recreates me, and recreates me, and recreates me, and recreates me. And if 1 second God would decide not to recreate me, it's not like that I would die.
You just wouldn't be here.
I just wouldn't even be here, right? And sometimes, perhaps, God could recreate me for him, but not for him. Or recreate something for him and not for him.
Wow.
Or recreate an ability of someone to do something. What if, this is the same famous medrash. The medrash that says that Pharaoh's daughter went down to the river to bathe, and down came a little basket. Baby Moses was in the basket.
Right.
So she says she sent out her maid, and she grabbed the basket. The medrash says, it was really an interesting medrash, because why does the medrash even have to say this? It says that her amma is a word for maid, but amma can also be her cubit, her arm. It says what happened was she reached out for that baby, and she wanted to grab him, and he was beyond her reach, and her hands just shot way out there and grabbed the baby and pulled him in.
Now that's different.
Beyond her ability. What's the medrash telling us that for? What is the medrash telling us that for? And I saw there's a great rabbi, died in the 1970s, and he said, Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, and he said, because it's within a person's ability. If the arm wants to reach out that far, you could do it. What prevents you from doing it? Your perception. Because your perception is creating your reality.
Wow. My perception or your perception?
My perception creates my reality. Your perception creates your reality. And guess what? Guess what? It might be the same thing. Might have two different realities.
I'm going to say, but is my perception to create my reality for you, though, as well?
That is also very interesting. Your perception. I mean, this is like, I just pulled up on the way here. I pulled up to the stoplight. So what do you do when you pull up to a stoplight? You glance over and see who's in the car next
Always.
to you, right? And there's, a young girl, and she's in the car, and she's like, and then she looks over and she sees me looking at her, and of course she's
embarrassed at that point.
right. So, my perception changed her reality.
Very good point.
Right. Her reality, she was like just totally lost in her music, and she's, I'm not hearing a word of it, of course, because all the windows are closed. But she's having, and my perception of her changed her reality. Well, we wanted to say that even in the physical mechanical way, that actually our perception of something could change something. And not only that, it could have multiple realities. And here's where this Brian Greene goes on to talk about something which, I had to wave goodbye as the train pulled out, and I said, bye. Saw it pulling up. So he talks about, there's the universe.
Right.
Nah. Multiverse.
Uh-oh.
Uni is so last century.
I think I saw this in Star Trek once, but go ahead.
Yeah, uni is really so last century, meaning there's only one universe.
Oh, we got multi-universes.
Multi, and you know what? The same things could be happening at the same time in multi-universes in different ways.
Well, that actually, just a side note, in the Star Trek episode I saw, the difference is that Spock had a beard. Each just so he can show the evil Spock had a beard in a different universe, and he didn't have one here, and that was the big difference. Mm-hmm. So there is a little different from what I saw in Star Trek. There is a little bit different in the universe.
Okay, so that's proof positive.
Proof positive, right there, right.
So let's tell you something even better, and this is where it really, really gets fun. We are worried about predicting. We want to try to predict the future. If I've got all the things like the weather, if we get all the factors together, I can tell you there will be a tornado that will touch down at such and such a spot, and the fact that we can't really predict the tornadoes, we all feel it's just because we don't have enough information or measuring equipment yet. But, if we could just tweak it some more, we'd really get down and look how well we're doing already. Right? And science can predict so many things and so on and so forth. Okay. But it's presumed, therefore, that once we know the facts, you can retrodict. You've probably only heard of predict.
Yeah, I never heard of retro.
There's retrodict too, which means you can say what happened.
I think my wife does that a lot to me. She yells at me, always tells me what I did wrong.
That's right. That's right. She knows what happened even before you did it. She knows what you did.
Exactly.
She knows what you did, and she knows it was wrong.
Right.
And if you thought it was right, it didn't matter.
No.
It was wrong. Okay. So she can retrodict and say that thing was wrong.
Right.
So we think, though, that of course we can't tell the future, but everyone can tell the past.
Right.
Quantum mechanics says, who says? Just because it's observed now in such a way. For example, just because you observe particles that came through the slit, maybe they were waves beforehand. How do you know what they were? And if they were waves, they could have been many other things. Now you've observed them as particles.
Right.
But they might have been waves before, and if they were waves, they might have been acting in who knows what way. Then they changed, and now they created this, but who says what they were then? So you can't even tell. So for example, if you were to observe the universe based on what you see now, you can say, must be this universe is 1 billion years old. Because I see the results now, just like looking at all these particles, must be that energy, that the electrons are particles, because look how they all ended up on the other side of the slit. You can say, well, not necessarily. Maybe they were a wave. And what happened maybe with the way they were before, the way you're observing it now doesn't tell you what it was before.
True.
So just because you observe something now, like it happened this way, does that mean that it was that way? So now we can't even go back and talk about the past. We think for sure we can talk about it's the future we have a hard time with. Quantum mechanics says, guess what, folks? You can't really even talk about the past. It's not a sure thing.
Wow. Okay, so explain how this brings in God. Because I'm now I'm confused, so let's get me even more confused.
Okay. So here, listen. This is really unsettling for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult. Many people don't believe, for example, in miracles. I don't believe in miracles. Can't be miracles, right? It's not a miracle. It can always be explained because of this or that or this or that factor. The Jews got to the sea. You don't understand. It's because the moon was in such a position, the planets are in such a position, high tide, east wind, da 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 da. It's that perfect once-in-a-lifetime storm that causes the sea to split and the people to walk through.
Right.
Okay. You know what? Maybe they're struggling to do this because they cannot believe that things could be different than the way we observe them now, that we're bound by certain laws. And we say, who says? I'm not saying that quantum mechanics is the answer. That's the way God did it, that we finally discovered the God method. Because tomorrow, when they get rid of quantum mechanics and they come up with some other type of mechanics, like maybe your type of whatever that mechanics was, or I don't know, and they'll all be out the window. All I'm saying is that science today has pretty much ascertained, and quantum mechanics is pretty widely held by most scientists now, has ascertained that things are not exactly as we observe them. And even the past cannot be determined to have been based on what we're observing right now. Not necessarily. And as a matter of fact, the way we observe things now are the limitations, the physical realities, Newtonian physics. If the apple falls from the tree, you cannot necessarily say that it's going to land here. Here's one. Here's a great one. You observe a certain electron. And guess what? Quantum physics says the best we can do is to tell you that if I come back, if I shoot it into a box, out of 100 times, 50 times it'll end up here, and 50 times it'll end up there. And that's the best I can get. And you know what? When they observe it over and over and over again, 50 times, 50, but they can't tell you which time it'll end up here or there. But interestingly enough, they'll tell you that after all these times, half the times it ends up here and half the times it ends up there. What that tells us is that there's a lot of things that we really, really do not know. And to me,
so something else is happening here.
So if you say that things, they seem very chaotic to us, but if I get back to my billiards experiment, and I say that 99 times 7 ball in the side pocket. However, all things being equal, that 100 times 7 ball doesn't go in the side pocket. I could tell you it's really because all 100 times, there's no law that says that the 7 ball is going to go in the side pocket. There is no law. What you got is there's a God out there, and 99 times he says, okay, this is the way I'm going to run it.
So he's recreating this each day.
Every time he decides, where's it going to go? Okay, I'll put the 7 ball in the side pocket. One time he decides not to, doesn't go there. Goes wherever he wants it to go. You know what? The truth is all 100 times it went wherever he wanted it to go. It's just he decided 99 times I'll send it the same place. You know what? That gives people a certain sense of what they consider to be predictability. And you know what? It gives them a lot of free choice too. Because otherwise they would live in this world of chaos and they wouldn't really know what to do.
So we're looking for order here as people. We figure we hit the ball the same way, the same time it's going to go in there. But this is God-created world. I mean, quantum physics does take away what we talked about before, that Newtonian philosophy, that everything's going to happen exactly what it's supposed to be.
Predictability,
something else is, so
laws,
you have no explanation of why you hitting that ball exactly the right way, the correct way, made that ball not go into the 7 ball going into the corner pocket.
Now, why does God keep repeating this on a regular basis? Why does it mostly go that way? Because he wants us to function according to certain rules and endeavor and try to do our best and so on and so forth. However, that can be liberating to a certain extent, because if it was total chaos, we wouldn't know what to do next. So, for example, God says, put on tefillin. God says, put a mezuzah on your doorpost. Well, in order to tell us to put a mezuzah on the doorpost, most of the time it really has to be that there's a doorpost and it's actually there and it's solid and that you can nail the mezuzah. So
God does need to create that doorpost over and over
and
over
and he does all the time. And when I walk in, I kiss the mezuzah, and it's got to kind of be there, and I can expect it's going to be there because I put it up there, So that is in itself liberating. However, there's another liberation also, which is knowing that it doesn't have to be that way. Now that's good too. Here, witness this story in the Talmud.
Interesting.
There's a rabbi and they're very, very poor. And the rabbi's daughter comes and she says to him, "Father, we have no oil for the Sabbath candles." So the father says, "What do we have?" She says, "All we have is a little bit of vinegar." Right. So he says, "Okay, put the vinegar in the oil in the lamp and burn that." So she said, "Vinegar doesn't burn."
Right.
So he said, "Let he who told oil burn, tell vinegar to burn."
Right. Right.
So she lit him up and vinegar burned.
Vinegar burned.
Now, why did it burn? Because he needed the vinegar to burn. He realized that, well, what makes oil burn? Oil doesn't burn because there's a Newtonian law that says it burns. Oil burns because when you light it up, God makes it burn.
Right.
If you lit up vinegar and God wanted to make it burn, he can make it burn. And if a person, the observer, in our case, the observer now becomes the mitzvah observer.
Right.
The observant Jew who's following his laws and trying to live his life according to the way God wants. There are times where God can step in and just change reality from, because it never was a fixed set reality. When the miracle happens, God's all of a sudden, whoa, miracle, the vinegar's burning. Not necessarily. You should say, whoa, miracle, the oil burned. That's just God's will. When you light the match to the oil, it burns. If God wanted you to light a match to vinegar, that will burn. Who changes it? The observer.
So bottom line, we live in a pretty predictable world. Pretty predictable, but not 100% predictable.
Right.
And sometimes those non-predictable events are God, but we could call today miracles.
Right.
We could call them miracles. And that's
So,
what it
so
is.
it's very exciting. It's exciting to know that God gives a certain measure of predictability to the world,
Which we have
is
to
wonderful.
have. We need that.
Wonderful. So nice of God to do that
I guess
for
that's
us.
nature. Is that nature? Would
Yeah,
call
you
that
could
nature?
call that, right? Call that nature.
Right.
Matter of fact, the fact God keeps recreating me and recreating me every second and lets me keep saying the next word and the next word
Right.
and the next word. And this is really wonderful. On the other hand, I can account on that. However, I should always watch out and don't get so stuck in counting on it
Right.
that you become forlorn, that you become despondent,
Right.
because you always have to believe that hey, it can change too. And it's not like such a great miracle. It says even the sharp blade is resting on your neck. Never give up.
Right.
Never give up.
Right.
Miracles happen. The sea can split. The sea did split. That's what we're all about. The sea split. The vinegar burnt. That could happen too. There's a great passage in the Talmud that says that blessing only rests on those things that are hidden from the eye. And what it means is like this. It says in the Talmud, if you have money, bury it. Bury it in the ground where you don't see it. Because when you come back, there might be more money there. Now, if you're sitting there looking at it and you're counting it all the time, it'll always be the same amount.
Right.
But if you're not looking at it, you could come back and there's more. How could that be? Well, the way that could be is because God could just make more.
You just make more.
But if if you're looking at it and you're going to determine, that there's 100 there, you're going to keep, well, there's 100 there, so there's got to be 100 there. So you keep counting, and lo and behold, there still is 100 there.
Right.
But if you stop counting it, who knows what could happen?
It could be 200.
If you don't observe the particles going through the slit, they could be a wave. But your observing of them congeals them, I guess you could say, into particles.
So the whole basic thing is about the observing. Obviously, that example, but I guess the ultimate example is it God that's observing? I mean, God is observing what we're doing. He's observing the mitzvahs. He's observing what you're doing. And
We are the observers, and we create realities. It's like some guy was trying to tell me, says, that wall solid? It says maybe it's just a big pile of mush.
right.
It's just a big pile of mush until now it's solid. But you know what? Second before my hand
It
touched
could
it,
have been mush.
it would have been mush.
That was your observing the wall.
Right.
And it wasn't.
But my observing by putting my hand up against it, that made it all congeal. Who knows? Who knows? So what we are supposed to do, but if there's a God in the world, this could be, and it's nothing to worry about, nothing to go crazy about. You don't have to start jumping off of buildings, because God is in control of every single particle of matter, and he's making all these decisions every moment, and to you it's solid, and to me it's not solid, and he's creating our realities, and he's changing our realities, and the two cars that were going to have an accident didn't have an accident, but maybe the same car did have an accident,
Right.
and on and on and on, maybe this one died, maybe this one's alive, and so on and so forth. But you can rest assured that if there's a God in the world, he's taking care of all this.
He's taking care. So it's even possible that what I see right now as the present might be different when I'm looking back now as the past.
That's right.
We might not have had this conversation. I might be the guy with the beard right now.
That's right.
Or at least for a couple
You
of
know what? The truth is there could be a world that has dinosaur bones in it. That doesn't mean that there were dinosaurs. There might have been.
I gotcha.
There might have been. Maybe not, too. Who knows?
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
You know, that's the past. Now is the present. And even the present.
Maybe.
Right. Even the present. Real big maybe.
Now I'm really confused, but yeah.
But all I say is that once upon a time, when there was Newtonian physics, there really was only one question when it came to God. Because we know the rules are there, locked in, everything's going to happen.
Right.
There's only one question. Where did it all come from? So then they said, well, God was the prime mover.
Right.
Quantum physics says, how could there be a present without God? And that's what Judaism says.
Wow.
That every minute, God's making everything happen, always. So the quantum model is closer to the Jewish model. Now, the quantum model might be rejected, and they'll come up with a new model. All I'm saying is the quantum model is closer to the Jewish model than the Newtonian model.
And that makes sense. And you do happen to see, when you read a lot of articles, there are a lot of quantum physicists that are now saying, yeah, this is, well, maybe not a proof of God, but a proof that, not an absolute proof of God, but a proof that you can't reject God now, because now you're saying that you now have the possibility of God in the scientific equation.
Right. So if anything, I would have to say that a true scientist should be the greater, not say believer in God, but a true scientist has to be open to God, to the existence of God, because otherwise science has so many questions. We have more questions now about reality.
Right.
About reality. Forget about the past. I'm talking about reality, about the present, about things really existing. There are more questions now about existence than there were ever before.
Oh, that's interesting.
For a believer, okay, we've always looked at it like that.
Yeah, but you're right. For a scientist, he's got to be more open to this than anyone else now, because he can't put everything in a nice little package anymore.
That's right.
Well, interesting. Very interesting, and I like, this worked out better than what I thought the topic was, so I'm much more excited about this.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm sure we'll have a lot of pondering and thinking on this topic right here.
That's right, and everyone can check out. I want to give a shout out to a guy whose article I just read. I want to quote his name, Morris Engelson. Morris Engelson is a professor in electronics in Oregon, and he just wrote up some of the stuff which I got a lot from his article, and of course I refer everyone to all the Brian Greene books. Very good.
Right. Interesting. All right, great. Well, we will see you back next week for another great and exciting and maybe even controversial topic.
Yeah.
See you then.